Hi there, welcome back. This thing is looking a little bit bare, as you probably noticed, and I'll give you some good news for a start. I've got this thing working, and when I say working, I mean both FM and AM, and of course we know the amplifier works, the pickup input works, and it was a combination of things that I had to correct and things that I had to repair. I must admit that the corrections were far greater than the repairs, unfortunately, again. But let me talk you through them and describe to you what it was that I found. The first thing was this drum switching system they have here. As I described in the first video, I think it was, you switch in the various parts of the circuit for the AM bands. This is the first RF stage, the second and the third. So depending on what band you're on, this thing inside has got a whole lot of coils and capacitors, and those are described and actually shown on the schematic for each band. And they also show you how they connect to these various points, which then go off to the common circuitry here that is not band dependent. In other words, that thing selects, for example, the front end, the RF front end. It tunes it to one of the bands. Let's call it broadcast band 2, which I think goes, well, from 1.6 megahertz down to about 900 kilohertz, I think it is. So those coils and capacitors in there, the tuned circuit in there is pertinent to that band. And of course, that then feeds the other parts of the circuit, which would work with any of the frequency bands. And those parts are down here. And then, of course, it goes to the IF amplifier down at the bottom. But the first thing I noticed is this thing had been opened, which is the usual thing. You'd open it to clean the contacts. Now, these contacts are notorious for building up some grime. And as was actually very correctly pointed out by one of the comments, these radios were mostly used on 1 or 2 or 3 bands. So let's say the guy used this on FM and on medium wave or broadcast band. That means that all the time this thing is sitting there basically flicking between one and the other. If he's using 2 of the AM bands, let's call it broadcast band 1 and 2. So he'd be flicking between that and that, that and that. And the other contacts, the other connections for the other bands would just sit there and corrode effectively. So they needed cleaning, and they always need cleaning on these on this type of setup. However, there was something else here. Whoever came in and tried to clean this actually went one step further, and he actually bent these things. And some of them were not making contact. There were 3 of these. He didn't touch the back end, the third stage. But on these 2, there were 3 that were not making contact, no matter how clean those were and how clean these were. Now, I cleaned them anyway, and the way I did it is I got a bit of absorbent paper. This is sort of blotter paper. I bent it, just, you know, and bent it a bit more actually, just get a strip. And then I sprayed contact cleaner on there, and I would spray it on there as well. And then you very gently, very carefully would go up and down and clean the contacts. And that definitely cleaned them. But I had to sort of do a little bit of very careful bending in here to give this the tension that it had lost when whoever it was that was in here pulled this out or tried to bend it just by pushing in there. You can't do it that way. Anyway, that started working, and I started getting AM very, very poorly. Very, very poorly. But I could sort of hear that hiss and the sounds of radio, right, if you want to call it that, on AM. I could get it on quite a few, actually on all the bands. But very little reception, okay? So I had to look for something else. And I then decided to tackle the obvious fault that I detected here on the first video, which was that one of these wires was just flapping in the breeze over here. And I had to figure out, it came from this coil over here. And from the schematic and from the drawings there, I figured out that it actually went to one of these pins over here on the wafer A. This is A, B, C, and D, and they've got drawings for each of these, so you can sort of follow the logic and see where that was missing. So that was soldered on there, and still nothing happened. Still getting hiss and everything else. Then I found one more wire here that was actually broken as well, but hidden underneath. It was coming out of the wafers down there, but it wasn't getting to here somewhere. So I had to attach a little wire there and complete that. So that got the ferrite antenna working, and I started being able to tune some stuff in on the lower frequencies. Now the ferrite works for long wave 1, long wave 2, broadcast 1, broadcast 2. Above that you'd normally use the rod antenna. I actually have not got the rod antenna connected. I'm using the mini whip that I have, and I've spoken about that quite a lot. It's a fantastic, magical little antenna. And the mini whip then brought in a lot more noise and actually some stations, some of the stronger stations. And I was able to figure out that I'd actually got the oscillators going and that some front-end tuning was happening and so on and so forth. Okay. Then I looked at something else. Let me see if I've forgotten anything so far. No, that's about it. Then I looked at something else. They tell you that this point C on the supply board, on the AF board, the point C has two different voltages depending on whether you select FM or AM. Now, the FM, as it is not adjustable. On the T1000, the predecessor to this model, which is the T1000CD, you actually had a little trim pot over here where you set the FM voltage to 5.3 volts. Okay? The way this is, depending on what voltage reference you have there, that and the name that escaped me the last time for that diode is a stebista, and they are notoriously not particularly exact. So again, as somebody mentioned in the comments, that one that I tested could well have been within spec. Okay, could well have been, but I replaced with the 4 diodes anyway, and I was getting about 5 volts, I think it was. Not quite 5.3, but that was fair enough. That's for FM, obviously. Now you set that with a voltage divider, which is resistors 512 and 513. That voltage divider establishes that voltage at 5 point something. In fact, in the T1000 service manual, they say that they've done away with the potentiometer after a certain series serial number, and that the 2 resistors they use in the circuit, which are both 4.7K, are in fact used to establish that voltage, and you can adjust one of those resistors if you want to be able to correct it and make that voltage exact. What I decided to do is I found that if I took 512, I think it was 512, I think it was resistor 512, and if I reduced it slightly, that made it go up. And so what I decided to do is to add a 100K trim pot, this guy over here. In parallel with that resistor, I've actually soldered it on the underside as a variable resistor. In other words, two of the pins are tied together. And I left it at 100K and then switch it on, and I can now adjust that exactly. Now when you adjust that exactly to 5.3 volts, something else changes, and that is that when you click AM, when you select AM, it's supposed to go to 5.7. This thing wasn't going to 5.7. This was going to like 7.5 or something like that. Really off the charts. And what they tell you to do is to adjust the FM, and then there's a pot over here, right over there, a trim pot, which allows you, leaving the multimeter on that point, it allows you to adjust the AM voltage to 5.7. So that's what I did. I got this exactly down to 5.3, and at 5.3, this takes a little while to settle when you first switch it on, but then it stabilizes. And at 5.3, I then went over here, changed to AM, and adjusted this to 5.7. I will show you that now. I've got this on FM now, and I'm going to switch on the power supply. I've got the volume turned down. We'll leave that surprise for later. And I need this to be at 5.3, and it's at 5.2 and climbing, and it'll go up a bit further and then settle at 5.3 and a bit, which is fine. After a little while, it's gone up to 5.295, but just to show you that I have control, I've got a lot of control because this is 100K in parallel with 4.7K, and I've got a 10-turn pot. So there's my 5.3. Now, if I turn it to AM, I should get 5.7. And that's as near as damn it. And you can adjust that quite easily here. I won't do it because I've done it and it's, well, I suppose I could. Just give it a little tweak. This is very sensitive. 5.7. Brilliant. Back to FM. And it'll go up to 5.3. Actually, it's going a bit higher. See that? I shouldn't have touched that. Really, that makes no difference. This is 0.01. 001. So there we go. 5.3 on FM and 5.7 on AM. Takes a little while because there are capacitors in line over here. So I got those working and the reception improved dramatically. Then I found that somebody had not had enough with messing around with this thing, and I discovered they'd messed around with the IF section of the AM, which is down here. Now the way this is set up is, these are the IF amplifier stages, or the IF stages, the IF boards of both the FM and the AM. They're completely separate, and they only join up on the audio stage when it goes to the selector switch, when you select whether you want FM, AM, or phono. What they have is, the FM is actually over here, and inside this box over here, there are a few trimmers. Now, none of those have the wax removed. I'm just looking carefully. These were not touched, thankfully, because the FM reception is exceptional and nobody messed with this, okay? Those over there have all been messed with except these two over here. So somebody got trying with these and couldn't get any joy out of it. They've taken that wax out as well, and they actually left these two alone, mysteriously. So I have to do an IF alignment, but before I do that, I'm going to turn this around and give you a bit of a demo of what sort of reception we're getting. It's very, very impressive. Let me show you. Now for FM, I'm going to use the two rod antennas at the top. You can turn them up and rotate them however you want. They're in perfect condition, and we can get this started now. So select FM. Take out the AFC. We are beautiful.
PT está a mudar. Ao ficar sem imagem, utilize o comando para...
Local dizem que o homem agiu propositadamente. Segundo a imprensa alemã, o homem não
Gotta leave it on talk radio because we don't want to get a copyright strike. And if you can see it, our field strength meter, our signal meter, is working perfectly as well.
pois
Now,
um homem
volume control,
detido 10 pessoas antes de cometer
treble.
suicídio em Frankfurt. Centenas de pessoas ficaram feridas na sequência do incidente desta
That's really all that
tarde na
operates
cidade
on this
alemã
channel.
de
You can do broad
Wolfenbüttel.
and narrow.
A Madeira registrou
Here's
hoje
our
a
narrow.
temperatura mais alta de
Here's
sempre
our broad.
no mês de fevereiro, com a estação
I don't know if you can hear it with the way I've got the microphone, but it opens up the bass a lot. And I can use AFC, where I can then sort of tune out and it stays on channel. So the AFC is working as well, which is bloody brilliant. All right. Now for the AM, what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect my mini whip antenna, which I've got here, and I'm connecting that to the ground and to the signal line, which I believe is that way around. I had to go check the front of the panel. It's actually the other way around. That's the ground, and that's the antenna. And now I'll turn it to AM. And let's see, this time of the day we won't get anything on long wave, but broadcast band 2 maybe. That's Canary Islands in the afternoon, which is pretty impressive.
Voces caídas del cielo, historias del exilio judío en Barcelona, 1881-1954. Un libro publicado y al comandar que surge cuando el autor se pregunta cuándo vuelven los judíos a la ciudad.
That's our famous local station, the only one we have on AM in Madeira. So let's look at FM. So where would we be today? Probably around 10 megahertz or so. So shortwave 5. When I say today, I mean at this time of day.
¿Y somos un destino emergente?
And here's where the fine-tuning, the band spread comes in. You can fine-tune it. Let's go up higher in frequency.
De palme d'Afrique, il y a le palme-ci, chiffre d'affaires annuel. Sifka s'enorgueillit même d'être le premier employeur de Côte d'Ivoire après l'État. À moins de 100 km de la frontière ghanéenne, le site de Toumandier, une usine de transformation entourée de 3500 and Ethiopian Airlines has defied TRUXA and has continued flying to 5 different Chinese cities.
This is pretty impressive. Even without the IF alignment, which I still need to do. Nothing up there at the moment.
Maybe that will happen in March, April. The current budget expires. After EU leaders reach agreement on the next one, the European Parliament will need to ratify it, which also promises to be complicated. Lisa Bride for VOA News, Paris.
Violent anti-government protests replaced carnival celebrations on Sunday in the Haitian capital.
Now this one here is the auto, or rather the manual gain control. So if I do that, there's an automatic gain control that operates trying to get all the stations to the same audio level. If I do that, it puts it on manual, and now it's on minimum, and I can increase that
However, it's just the latest
to the point where I need to get the right gain that I need, that I want. But obviously, AGC is a lot easier. There's usually very little up here. These frequencies, we're at 16 meg to 20 megahertz. If we go up even further, I don't think we'll get anything. But there we go. That, my friends, is as far as I've got, and it's actually pretty far. I'm very, very pleased. I'm very pleased. So I'm going to break the video for now, and I need to do some reading, and that's part of this hobby. This hobby, restoration, takes a lot of reading. I've got the main manual that came with the radio. The owner has it. It's about 60 pages, I think it is. I've got another manual that I got off the net, which is 98 pages, and there's some more photographs and more descriptions. So there's quite a bit of reading to do, and I want to do a bit more reading before I tackle the IF alignment of the AM. Since the FM is receiving so well and it looks like nobody has touched it, I'm going to follow that example. I'm not going to touch the FM alignment. It seems to be bloody perfect. And if it's good, don't mess with it. So, take a break for now, do some learning, some research, and then come back with the next video where, who knows, maybe I'll finish it then, I'm not sure. I want to thank you all for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this. Hope you've learned something. I certainly have. And if you like the channel, please click like. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And if you want to support the channel even further, you can do so on Patreon. I want to thank all my Patreon supporters who have come on board since I activated the Patreon account. I really am thankful. I got to tell you, there's no extras for being a patron. There is no special content and previews and all that jazz. It's only a sign of, well, I suppose gratitude and support if you want to do so. And if you don't, hey, that's fine too. Enjoy the channel. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye for now.